Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhyolite Zone for a short story and or some poetry. We play local unsigned and or indie music, and we head over to the Oak Shed later on in the show to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for an album review. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And you can email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. I particularly want to hear from poets, performers, musicians, people in the arts, people with stories to share. Don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also listen to us again. We're repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So we're going to head over to the Rhyolite Zone now, and this is some flash fiction by previous guest A.B. Frank.
Okay, so I've got an idea for a new series, Flash Fiction Friday. So every Friday, I'm going to write a piece of flash fiction, 250 words, give or take 10%. So between 225, 275 words, piece of flash fiction. It's going to be like horror, sci-fi, fantasy, Gaslamp, if I can manage that, if the writing prompts that I generate allow me to fit something in that genre. With episode 1, I generated a writing prompt. I'll read it to you now. It's a bit of a mouthful. For years, you were known as Stallion Jack, a highwayman by trade who gallantly relieved carriage passengers of their worldly possessions. The stories often describe you as a daring and dashing gentleman of the road, whose swashbuckling heroism was matched only by your chivalrous respect for all of your well-to-do victims. But little could be further from the truth. In reality, countless travellers were harmed or even murdered by your hand. It was all just part of the job from your point of view, until you accidentally killed a well-known priest who many claimed dabbled in dark magic. Fearing the repercussions, you decided you'd had your fill of highway robbery and fled to the countryside to lay low for a while. Strange nightmares have plagued you ever since. In the dreams, a shadowy figure appears at the end of your bed. One night you awake in a cold sweat, and you're terrified to find the shadowy figure standing right where you envisioned him. As you scramble to find a way to defend yourself, the figure speaks to you in a rattling voice. So, here is my first piece of Flash Fiction Friday, episode 1, which I have very creatively titled Stallion Jack. I awaked from another night of broken sleep to find the shadowy figure from my dreams drifting to and fro at the foot of my bed like a curtain in the breeze. I keep my revolver nearby at all times. I'd be a fool to think my past would never catch up to me. I reach for the smooth wooden handle of the gun, but freeze when I hear the voice. It is true what they used to say about me. It said, no, he said, that in life I did practice dark magic. Dark magic is how I visit you now, in death. The priest I killed last year had found me and manifested himself in my room. He produces a cufflink from his ethereal pocket. This belonged to you. I remember losing that cufflink, had to steal myself a new pair. You dropped it in your haste to flee the scene of my murder. The cufflink is my link to you. With this link, I will follow you wherever you go. Then he stowed it safely back in his pocket. With a sudden swoosh, the priest shot towards me, hovered over me, his face almost touching mine. You'll never escape me, he said, before flying across the room and under the bottom of the door. Gone. Something I learned as a highwayman was to let the victim feel in control until it was too late. He'd misunderstood me. He'd come too close, and I picked his pocket. I unclenched my fist and examined the cufflink. You'll have to get up earlier than this to outsmart Stallion Jack. The end. So close to the beaker he could feel the heat. Right, we'll have to start again. Can't have no mistakes on the podcast. What's going on, everybody? My name's A.B. Frank, and this is episode 3 of Flash Fiction Friday, where I write a 250 word, give or take 10% piece of flash fiction. I generate some words from randomwordgenerator.com and assign a genre to the story. Then I write it. So this week we have the sci-fi genre. The object or the noun that was generated was pollution, and the action or the verb that was generated was dissolve. And then I wrote the following story. It's called FFS. Enjoy. The scientist's assistant hurried into the laboratory from the smoggy streets and handed over the final ingredient. His eyes adjusted to the dark conditions where coloured liquids effervesced in glass beakers. Wonderful! The scientist snatched the package and unwrapped it with greed in his glare. This has to be precise, he said to his assistant. Turn the heat up slightly. The scientist added a level measurement of the fine green powder into a beaker, half filled with faintly yellow liquid that simmered above the flame. The liquid darkened, the powder dissolved, but nothing happened. Damn it! He slammed his fist on the desk. It hasn't worked and we've used most of the powder. The scientist added the remaining powder from the small wrapping and observed, his face so close to the beaker he could feel the heat of the liquid. Blue bubbles began to rise to the top of the solution. Slow at first, then faster and faster still. I've done it! By Jove, I've done it! Ha! His nose almost touched the glass. The assistant took 2 steps in the opposite direction, however. The racing effervescence was too much for the beaker to handle. It exploded in his face, simultaneously soaking and scalding him. The scientist had rushed the experiment and had to pay the price. His very skin began to effervesce and blister. Eventually, his howling subsided and he whimpered. His assistant appeared by his side wearing a protective mask, and before the scientist died, he said to him, I couldn't let you pollute the water with this poison. The river is already disgusting. The end.
Big thank you to AB Frank for that piece of flash fiction. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Humans Can't Reboot with Fallen Angel.
Beautiful, and make pain seem so invisible. You carry the universe in deep struggle. On your wings and never unfold. So deep inside, there are no tears in my eyes. Oh, falls from my heart every time. My soul is covered with your angel's light. Here beautiful, and make it seem so invisible. You carry the universe in deep struggle. On your wings and never flesh and blood. Only flesh and blood. He's the fallen one who came from up above. Came from up above. Angel from the other side, sent with love. Sent with love. Key to my fate, earth, ashes and dust. Earth, ashes and dust. And to the angel up in the sky, hail, hail, you are my messenger. I got it right. I don't need a shepherd, one alone is painful. So I stop following you alone, lost, fallen angel. Hail, hail. I know that His light is all that can save me. I'll bow before Him and pray for Him to deliver me. Rest my mind, touch my soul and set me free. We can fly away together, take my spirit where it longs to be. Take my spirit where it longs to be. Whoa. Take my spirit where it longs to be.
A moistened mattress from a fever dream. Unbridled panic, your dirty drama queen. A blood red sunrise reflects off an old guitar. You can run all you want to, but you won't get far. A tortured poet, creative cocaine fiend, runs his yellow fingers through 90s magazines. His tinted glasses disguise his absent gaze. There's no sense in rushing, he'll be for days. Prepare the pipes and we'll be fine. Numb in body and numb in mind. In your mind, in your mind. Prepare the pipes and we'll be fine. Numb in body and numb in mind. In your mind, in your mind. Finely balanced by a spoiled surprise. No, she can't be trusted, those shifty angel eyes. A backstreet banger or a future queen. To those dirtied masses, once washed but never clean. The eyes are rolling as you rot inside. No, I can't console you, but I'm by your side. You never listened to your own advice. If it nearly kills you, well then don't try it twice. Prepare the pipes and we'll be fine. Numb in body and numb in mind. In your mind, in your mind. Prepare the pipes and we'll
That was Prepare the Pipes by Robert Honor, and before that we had Fallen Angel by Humans Can't Reboot. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is where we would normally head over to chat to a guest. However, this week we are doing a highlight show, so this is part of our interview with Emma Timpany. So one of the things I want to ask you about, and you kind of, it's explained inside the book, but what are the linguistic roots of the word trivia?
Well, I don't want to get myself into deep water here, but it was really meant to sort of touch on this idea of when I was at school, I did a year or so of learning Latin, and they learned, you just sort of learned about the basis of lots of words. So tri in Latin would mean three, and via means road. So the word trivia or trivia, we say it's it's just that basically a basic translation of it is three roads. And so that ties in with the idea in the story of someone thinking about, in the main story, which is also, called Three Roads, it's this young girl who comes across this idea when she's younger, and then it sort of comes across it again later in life. But it sort of went on to then change its meaning really from, it was also the name of a goddess, and it sort of went on to change its meaning over time to something of little value, which I was sort of quite interested in, as well, how things change over time and lose their original meanings. So I think that's really what, I haven't explained that very well, I feel like, Dane.
No, I think you did. You did better than I would have done anyway.
I know. I think it's easier if you read the story. Hopefully it explains it a bit.
Well, another idea that you touch on as well is this idea of kind of crossroads, and we have this, this expression of being at a crossroads in our lives. But you talked about the idea of a crossroads isn't necessarily like, oh, you can go left, right, or straight ahead. Like if you think of it as more like, I don't know, like an X or a T shape or something like that. So there's not normally a direct route straight ahead.
No, and I think that's what, it's a sort of theme that runs through the collection is really the way we think about things as sort of, I suppose, black and white for, or sort of the decisions are going to be simple, or things that happen to us, life choices, or things that are thrust upon us. Often they are just very complicated and layered, and there's no simple way forward sometimes. Because people themselves are complex, and life is complex, and it's trying to deal with, not too complicated way. It's the idea of, that sort of ways that life can go off on tangents, really, and it's not quite that sort of clear cut. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And so this is going to be a tricky question, I think. But do you have a favourite story in the collection? And if so, why is that one your favourite?
That is a really tricky question. If I had to pick a favourite, I've always liked Three Roads. Yeah. Obviously, it's the theme of the collection really holds them all together. But it was a story that I never found a home for. A lot of the stories have been published separately, so I think it might be what I'd call a bit of a difficult story. It never found a home in a sort of literary journal or anything like that. Some of the others did, and obviously they were written over quite a long period of time. 10 years or more. But I think one of my favourites is the last story in the collection, which is called Flowers, which is to do with two people who meet each other, one of whom owns some land, and another person as a florist who is given the opportunity to grow flowers on this stranger's land, and the sort of relationship that these two people develop over time, and it's a lot to do with growing and planting and just how relationships develop really between two people and how things change over time. That was part of our chat with Emma Timpany, and now we're going to head over and chat to Corey Roop. So this is a highlight of our chat with her. But okay, so I want to chat to you a bit about your own writing as well. Can you tell us anything about what you're working on?
Yeah, so I've given my poetry a little bit of a break right now because I am consumed with this historical fiction. Right now, I am writing about the Buffalo Creek flood disaster, which happened in 1972 in West Virginia. And the gist is, as much as Appalachians are wonderful people, we have a lot of resources on our land. And so traditionally, as things go, big corporations like to come in and say, I'll take the resources, screw the people, who cares? And then when we're done, we'll leave and y'all will survive or you won't. West Virginia is actually filled with abandoned coal towns. There are tons of ghost towns around here because once the coal dried up, they just left.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest things about coal company history is that they have traditionally not cared at all about the safety or the well-being of their workers. You'll hear about things like black lung, which still exist, which is essentially a debilitating respiratory disease caused by coal mining.
Yeah.
But this is because this book and this event happened because they built a dam. When you mine for coal, you have to build dams because you have to process the coal and wash it. And what you end up with is a slurry. It's this really gross black water that you can't use for anything, and you just have to kind of find some place to stick it and leave it forever. You can sort of filter it out through many, many steps and processes, but traditionally they don't care to do so. What happened here in this town called, it's Buffalo Creek Holler, you can say hollow if you like, but in West Virginia it's holler, is they did not engineer their dam. They literally just took coal byproduct, dumped it, compacted it, and said, that'll do. And one thing about West Virginia is that there's very little flat land, so everything is a ridge or a holler. And so this coal dam sat atop a 17-mile stretch of 5,000 homes and residents. And so one day it started to rain ferociously for about a week and a half. There's no real construction or engineering into this dam, so the residents expected that it might break, at which point it would flood 17 miles of homes. And so this had been threatened before. A lot of people said, you know what, we hear about it all the time, it never happens. It did happen. And I think a little over 100 people died, 4,000 people were homeless, a 50-foot wall of water just bounced back and forth between the mountains. And when I read this story, I could not put it down. I mean, I thought I need to write about it, but I don't have time, so I put it away. And then a couple weeks later, it came back in my head, and I thought I don't have time, so I put it away. And I did this for a couple of months until I was like, fine. And so when I opened the next book that I was going to research, I saw that it actually happened the day my mother was born.
Okay, yeah.
And I said, okay, fine, universe, I will write the book, you know. But the coal companies claimed that it was an act of God and that they had no responsibility. And so there was this huge lawsuit that came after it. And I'm sad to say that things are not much better these days. Lawsuits have been enacted, but you know, there's lobbying, there's money, and where money goes, the interests of humans usually are not top priority. So there have not been any floods in Appalachia in a while, but there were dozens in a span of a decade or two, and they were all pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to see how the coal company just said it's not our problem at all, when really it was 100% negligence. And a lot of people died, families were washed away. And it's interesting because actually the police were alerted to go evacuate people. And as they were going to do so, a coal company executive stopped and said, oh, we fixed it. And so many people died that didn't have to, because again, the coal company interfered twice.
That was part of our chat with editor and one of my colleagues, Corey Roop, and you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Hogar's Wolf with the Fountains of Bimini.
focuses the mind on who are you, but consuming, oh, lust enduring, a venom of long ago, and a lightning that tracks twice to the same soft spot of the quickening drum. It's a Lemurican skin, our riddles to write. Are you the music refused by you? Good for an age, oh, vanity's fair maid, in the eyes of a fool who hides from a star, hides from a star, and a lightning that tracks twice to the same soft spot of the quickening drum. It's a Lemurican skin, and it riddles to right.
That was The Fountains of Bimini by Hogar's Wolf. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. And it's time to get back to our highlight show. I also work with best-selling author CJ Anaya, and this is part of our chat with her. So how long have you been writing, and how did you first sort of get into writing?
I got into writing via songwriting. It was a fluke, really, because I'm a singer and a songwriter. I was going to school to be a jazz vocalist, and I was signing a CD at this bookstore alongside an author who I had happened to have read quite extensively. So I was freaking out. I was having my fangirl moment and just couldn't believe she was there. And she snared me into the writing world by saying, you should join our writing group. If you can write songs, if you can write lyrics, you can write a novel. So she simplified it so I wasn't too scared to join. And then, only later did I realize that writing a novel is far more complicated and different. I mean, writing songs are difficult, but good glory, like writing a novel. Oh, man. So I joined that writing group, and we would meet once a month, and we'd share pages of what we had done, and we would get that feedback. And I slowly started to learn how to write books via writing groups, and also, being connected to writing conferences. So I started attending writing conferences with her, and that began in, I would say, probably about 2014, 2015. And then I wrote my first book, The Healer, and published it in 2015 with a traditional publisher. And I hated what the traditional publisher was doing on the marketing front, which was nothing, and the cover front, which was meh. They didn't really know how to cover books correctly. So I was like, okay, I'm going to come up with all of these marketing things I'm learning, lead pages, building a newsletter, Amazon ads. I'm going to come to them with this great marketing plan and present it to them and say, here's the things that we could be doing. And, what do you want me to do? And the response I got from that was, we've been publishing books for years. We know how to sell books. And I'm like, not according to my royalties. I would have to disagree on that. So I eventually got my rights back and I went full speed ahead on the indie side of things. And that's really where it all got started, was 2016. I kind of hit the ground running and I have never looked back. So, yeah.
Well, I suppose also when you're with a traditional publisher, you're losing a sort of certain percentage of all of your sales to them anyway. And so you kind of expect a certain amount from them. But I mean, The other thing as well, especially with sort of modern marketing, is you kind of need like a blow by blow, almost like day by day, hour by hour breakdown of sales. And I think a lot of publishers, it's hard to get that information from them. So even if you were to go ahead and do all these things you're saying, like your Amazon ads and your lead pages, when you're self-published or you're indie published, I think it's a lot easier for you to actually track the impact you're having.
Yeah, it is. And it's important to track it, especially when it comes to either publishing exclusively on Amazon, or if you feel like your audience is also on Barnes and Noble, or publishing wide, as we say in the industry, all of the other retail sites. You need to be able to track where your sales are coming from and which books are getting more sales on which platforms, so that you can really be strategic about where you publish and where you put your marketing dollars. So, and that's very hard to figure out if you've got a third party intervening, like a publisher who won't share that information. And I don't know a lot of publishers in the traditional realm who actually do. So, yeah.
Cool. Awesome. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I suppose, well, let's go on, move on to chat about some of your books. So can you tell us about a few of the sort of books and the series you've worked on and the genres that you write in?
Yeah. So I write under 3 different pen names because I'm crazy. The first one is CJ Anaya, and that's focused solely on teen and young adult romantic fantasies. So I have the Healer series. It's a complete series of 4 books, and that has Japanese mythology, reincarnated princesses, samurai swords, a real fun prophecy, and it focuses on choice versus destiny, and consequences of pushing the line when you're going against the laws of nature and all that good stuff. So I'm trying to help teens critically think while also entertaining them. Hopefully that's the goal. And then Paranormal Misfits is a really fun 6-book series that what I love is that Krista, I think, is a lot about me, really. I think I put a lot of me into Krista, and she is a changeling. She thinks she's human, but she's not. And then she also has a very important destiny to bring the Fey realm together and to unite different species and different races under one common goal, which is to defeat this common enemy. So, I'm really trying to challenge this idea of, us versus them. Get people to understand inclusion and diversity, and then again, hopefully do that in an entertaining way. So that's what I do with CJ Anaya. Cynthia Savage is the other pen name I write under, and that's more fluffy in the sense that I do a lot of fun rom-coms. And it's not meant to be thought-provoking in any way. It's just supposed to be fun and an escape, and because I love that. So it's always happily ever after. If you're looking for tragedy, someone dying in the end, if you want a Nicholas Sparks book, that is not me. So steer clear of me on that one. They're also fairly clean. So I don't do, there's no sex scenes. And I say clean hesitantly because there's always that whole oh my gosh, saying clean or saying dirty, it's disparaging. Basically that's just the genre it's under, is the clean and wholesome. And then Angelina Avery is where we get very steamy with the sci-fi romance, and that's very much adult, and I do it under Angelina Avery because it's so different from CJ Anaya, and that the target market is different, the age group is different, and the content as far as romance goes is also very different. So those are the 3 pen names I write under, and it's a lot of fun to do different things like that.
That was part of our chat with best-selling author CJ Anaya, and this is some of what we talked to about when we talked to local artist Jack Smith. obviously you've exhibited your work here and there around about Wickham. You know, you've done some stuff at Wickham Arts Centre. What have been some of your favourite or some of your highlights in terms of where you've exhibited your art so far?
Well, the furthest exhibit I've had my stuff in was in Brighton, near the seafront. It was in a gallery called Broken Arrows, but I think they've moved just along the roads now, so they'll have to wait probably a few weeks before I could go back there.
Yeah.
But it's nice just seeing artists from a different town.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true because, and I was going to ask, because you know quite a lot of the artistic community in Wickham. Are there any particular local artists whose work you really admire, or that you want to give a particular shout out to?
I think I'll name one. I think it's mainly because I've known this artist from the start. So he's on Instagram. He's goes by name Calculator.
Yeah.
And he does abstract stuff.
Yeah.
But again, it uses quite vivid backgrounds. I think it's normally in like stripes. So it's like stripes going across, and then it's almost like graffiti.
Yeah.
I remember he said, like at the beginning, I thought he said that he worked, or he did. He's into graffiti at the start anyway. And he's just given me a lot of advice throughout the art shows, so that's quite helpful.
Awesome, cool. Well, funnily enough, I've got one of his pieces on my wall up there, and it's right by. Hang on, I'll just show you. You can just about see he did an illustration of my cat. So that's those yellow eyes up there. That's my cat. And Calculator did that, and then there is the one that I got from you at the art show as well. So I've got both of your art on my wall, and I wanted to ask you about that piece I got from you from I think it was from the Big Arts Market. It was from one of the Art Centre events anyway. But what's the story behind that particular piece of art, or that series of pieces?
Well, that's just that was quite an early one. I think that's probably 2019, 2020. I think it's just experimenting with just like flowing lines and just seeing what will happen with stripes if I'd use certain colours.
Yeah.
Also using album covers from the 60s or posters from the 60s. So stuff like Big Brother and the Holding Company, they have really cool posters. Oh, and Grateful Dead, they got cool covers.
Awesome. That was part of our chat with Jack Smith. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is Andrew Cobain with A Part We Fell.
The waves they came on the seventh day. The waves they washed it all away now. I saw you there, just standing bare. No longer life in your eyes.
That was Straight 8 with Move On Up, and before that we had Apart We Fell by Andrew Cobain. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to head over to the Ilkshed now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
U2, The Joshua Tree, an album I paid £1 for in a charity shop. It is quite common for a band's career to peak with one album. It arrives on a perfect storm of acquired musicianship, a set of very strong songs, record company confidence allowing a good budget, and the hiring of the right producer. The Rolling Stones had Sticky Fingers, The Who had Who's Next, and U2 had The Joshua Tree. I quite liked the first thing I heard from U2, which was the single I Will Follow. They had moved on from punk's distorted buzzsaw guitar sound to something cleaner, chiming and droning and steering clear of the blues tones of heavy rock, and placing everything firmly on the beat. Watching them on TV live, the concert they did at Red Rock, I was impressed by the elegant yet economical way the guitar filled out the sound, with the aid of effects pedals. They were tuneful and had something important to say with songs like Sunday Bloody Sunday and Pride in the Name of Love. Along the way they had acquired the star production team of Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois. They probably hoped that Eno would make them sound like heroes. One thing the producers did do in their favour was not make the album sound 80s, and so it has always sounded quite timeless. They also brought with them long-held notes and a mixture of space and big sound with choir-like backing vocals. With or Without You was another strong single, but for me they peaked with I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. But by the time I heard Streets With No Name, I was a bit bored of the formula. The album is far from being just those 3 tracks. There is a bouncy shuffle, more sing-along choruses such as In God's Own Country, and a dirgy, marchy, anticlimactic ending, giving the whole thing an interesting shape. The only solo on the album is a harmonica, and given that they were going for something more American, hence the name, a few soaring lead solos would not, in my opinion, have gone amiss. They followed the Joshua Tree with a refreshing change of style, with Desire and Angel of Harlem on their next album. But that is where my interest in U2 ended. I could only take so many 1-4 chord changes, machine-like drums and bass playing root notes glued to the beat that only ever varies in intensity. That same guitar that only varies by using different effects. And words sung to different notes that seem rarely to actually make up much of a tune. But this album is a classic, and in the right mood I could even find it inspirational and uplifting. However, I think that had they only released just one more album, I would remember them more fondly, and they would have been able to retire as legends. The Joshua Tree, U2.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to AB Frank for this week's trip to the Rhylight Zone. Thank you to all of the bands whose music I've played. Thank you to everyone whose interviews we shared highlights of. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. You can also email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. And I particularly want to hear from poets, performers, musicians, anybody with MP3s, anybody with stories to share, anyone involved in the local arts news. Don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also listen to us again. We're repeated on Monday nights at Wickham Sound. We're also on the Wickham Sound Listen Again. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So that's about it for this week. I'm going to leave you with one last tune. This is Simon Gregory with Call of Duty. I'll chat to you next week.
To school, but I worked my father's land. I'd never been 10 miles from our home, but after 15 summers I could ride and I could shoot, and I ventured to the county fair alone. sergeant in the army tent had shillings on his drum, and his stories and the ale called to me. And before I knew it, I'd received my shilling and a gun, off to fight the French for my king and country. And it wasn't just the foe who saw us coming, as we marched in line with rifles in our hands, and slaughtered boys who looked like us but spoke another tongue, to decide which rich man got to rule the land. Rule the land. Oh. 2 centuries on, it's still the same. Everything's different, but nothing's changed. I wasn't good at school, and I couldn't find a job that required all the skills I'd learned at home. A life of watching movies, playing Xbox, flying drones doesn't fit you for a standard office clone. But I'd seen all the recruitment advertising, let us make you into all that you can be. And before I knew it, I'd received a buzz cut and a gun, and the rest is military history. History. 'cause we'd made friends to last a lifetime. They never said how long that life would be. And those of us who made it back were not the boys who left our homes to answer to the call of our duty. They promised we'd come back covered in glory. We'd be heroes and our country would be proud. But who has worked for men who've seen too much and can't forget the things they've done and blood spill on that foreign ground? And it wasn't just the foe who saw us coming, as we stood there with our papers in our hands. It wasn't in the desert or the field or in the trench, but on the home front where we took our final stand. It wasn't just the foe who saw us coming, as we stood there with our papers in our hands. It wasn't in the desert or the field or in the trench, but on the home front where we took our final stand. The final stand. Who rules the land? Who makes the choice? Who makes the profit? Who pays the price?